Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
We purchased an older home in a moderately deed-restricted Florida neighborhood in late July. A seemingly idyllic property that seemed to be everything we had been looking for. Tucked away in a serene community, the house had character, a history etched into its walls, and a charm that felt like a perfect fit for us. The property boasted mature trees, a sprawling yard, and a quiet corner lot that offered the kind of privacy you can only dream of in a suburban setting. However, the peaceful exterior masked a lurking issue, one that would soon unravel into a full-blown nightmare. Just 1 week before closing, we received a jolt from the mortgage company. Their routine survey had uncovered something that had slipped through the cracks for decades. A portion of our driveway and a shed, both well-established and integral parts of the property, had been built on a right-of-way actually owned by the HOA. The realization struck us hard. The driveway and the shed had been there for at least 25 years, presumed by the sellers to have been approved by the original contractor. But it became shockingly clear that no such permit had ever been obtained. The discovery was unnerving, but at that point it felt like a minor inconvenience in the grand scheme of things. The right-of-way led to a neglected triangle-shaped 3/4-acre wooded parcel behind our house, a patch of land that directly abutted 9 properties, including ours. For as long as anyone could remember, the HOA had turned a blind eye to this parcel. It was the kind of place that had been forgotten by time, a slice of wilderness amid a meticulously manicured neighborhood. Trees had grown tall, underbrush thickened, and the parcel had become a natural buffer, providing privacy and a sense of seclusion to the homes that bordered it. The potential for future problems didn't go unnoticed, and we negotiated a price reduction with the sellers due to the uncertainty surrounding the driveway and shed. Still, with everything being in place for over 2 decades without issue, I assumed I could eventually approach the HOA for an after-the-fact variance. It seemed like a reasonable plan. A mere formality in a neighborhood where change moved at a glacial pace. We settled into our new home embraced by the neighborhood's quiet charm. Life was good, and the issue with the right-of-way faded into the background, eclipsed by the excitement of new beginnings. Little did we know that this slumbering land was about to be jolted awake by a force far greater than our quiet, hopeful dreams. Hurricane Matthew swept through our corner of Florida with the fury of a vengeful spirit. The storm barreled through the neighborhood, leaving behind a trail of destruction that no one had anticipated. Trees that had stood for decades were uprooted and thrown around like twigs. The previously neglected triangle-shaped parcel was no exception. Its towering trees, once a symbol of the land's unyielding nature, were now scattered like matchsticks. The devastation didn't stop there. Several of those trees came crashing down onto power lines, plunging our entire neighborhood into darkness for 3 long, sweltering days. The aftermath of the hurricane was a wake-up call to everyone in the neighborhood. The parcel, which had long been ignored, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. The power outage had been the last straw for many residents who were already disillusioned with the HOA's lack of action. Neighbors began to demand that the HOA finally address the parcel's overgrown state. The chorus of complaints grew louder, and the HOA, now faced with pressure from every direction, was forced to respond. What came next was a decision that sent shockwaves through our community and shattered any illusions of tranquility we had left. The HOA, in its newfound determination to address the parcel, decided that the entire wooded area would be razed. Every tree, every shrub, every piece of underbrush would be cleared away. It was a decision that felt like a sledgehammer to the life we had just started to build. In the midst of this plan, our driveway and shed, those seemingly insignificant pieces of our property that encroached upon the HOA's right-of-way, became collateral damage. The HOA made it clear that in the process of clearing the parcel, they would also be removing the portion of our driveway and the shed that had stood for a quarter of a century. The news hit us like a tidal wave, leaving us scrambling for a way to keep our home intact. As if the prospect of losing part of our property wasn't enough, the aftermath of the razing was poised to turn the area into a public space, accessible to everyone in the development. But this wasn't going to be a carefully planned park with amenities for families and children. There would be no playground equipment, no landscaping, nothing to make it an inviting place for community gatherings. Instead, it was set to become a barren, secluded expanse of land, an unmonitored void that would likely attract the local teenagers looking for a place to drink beer and smoke pot, far away from prying eyes. And this empty, unpoliced expanse would be right next to our house, shattering the peace and privacy we had once cherished. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming. It felt like we were being backed into a corner with no clear way out. The HOA president offered a sliver of hope. If we could convince some of the other property owners who bordered the triangular parcel to take responsibility for a portion of the land, the HOA might be willing to simply give it to us. The catch: we would have to maintain the land, and we wouldn't be able to build anything permanent on it. It was an offer laden with uncertainty, but it was the only option we had to prevent the land from being turned into a public nuisance. But this option wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Before we had even moved in, the HOA had already sent out letters to the affected property owners, proposing the very idea we were now being presented with. The response had been a resounding lack of interest. No one wanted the hassle or the responsibility of maintaining a piece of land that, to them, offered nothing but extra work and liability. Faced with this daunting challenge, I took it upon myself to go door to door, pleading with my neighbors to reconsider. The weekend stretched out before me as I prepared to knock on each door, armed with arguments that stressed the impending loss of privacy and the consequences of having a public open space right on the other side of their fences. The task was intimidating, but I knew that our future in this home depended on the outcome. As I made my rounds, I encountered a range of reactions. Some neighbors were sympathetic, others indifferent, and a few outright hostile. It became painfully clear that most people were more concerned with their immediate convenience than the long-term impact of the HOA's decision. I tried to paint a vivid picture of what would happen once the vegetation was gone and the land was left open and barren, but my words often fell on deaf ears. One neighbor, an older man with a gruff demeanor, dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand. "That land's been there forever," he grumbled. "Why should I take on the burden now? I've got enough to worry about with my own yard." Another neighbor, a young couple with a toddler, listened politely but ultimately declined. "We understand where you're coming from," the husband said, "but we really don't want to deal with the extra maintenance. We barely have time to take care of our own property as it is." The weekend wore on, and with each door I knocked on, my hope dwindled. The reality was sinking in. Convincing my neighbors to take on a portion of the land was going to be an uphill battle, one that I was increasingly losing. As I trudged home after a long day of rejections, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The razing of the land was inevitable, and with it, the loss of the privacy and peace we had so briefly enjoyed. The thought of that once ignored parcel being transformed into a desolate space, a magnet for trouble, was unbearable. The following days were a blur of anxiety and frustration. I tried to explore other options, consulting with a lawyer, researching property laws, and even considering selling the house before the situation worsened. But every avenue seemed to lead to a dead end, and the realization that we were trapped in a nightmare of our own making was suffocating. The day the razing began was one I'll never forget. The sound of chainsaws and heavy machinery filled the air, drowning out the once peaceful birdsong that had been a constant companion in our backyard. I watched in horror as the trees were felled one by one, their towering forms crashing to the ground with a finality that echoed through the neighborhood. The underbrush was ripped away, leaving behind a barren, exposed landscape that felt alien and harsh. As the dust settled, the reality of our new situation hit me with full force. The parcel, once a shield of privacy, was now an open wound, raw and exposed for all to see. The driveway, now truncated, felt incomplete, a constant reminder of what we had lost. The shed, a once functional space for storage and projects, was now gone, leaving us with a gaping hole in both our property and our hearts. The final blow came in the form of the very thing we had feared: a group of teenagers, drawn to the newly cleared land like moths to a flame. They wasted no time in claiming the space as their own, setting up makeshift hangouts and leaving behind a trail of litter and broken bottles. The once quiet nights were now filled with the sounds of loud music, drunken laughter, and the occasional police siren. It was a nightmare we couldn't escape, a daily reminder of the battle we had lost. As the weeks turned into months, we struggled to adapt to our new reality. The dream of a peaceful life in our charming older home had been shattered, replaced by a constant undercurrent of tension and unease. The neighborhood, once a symbol of tranquility, now felt like a battleground, with the HOA's decision looming over us like a dark cloud. In the end, the story of our home became one of warning, about the perils of overlooked details, the dangers of assuming things will remain as they are, and the harsh reality of living in a community where the collective will can turn against you in an instant. It's a story that haunts us, a lesson learned the hard way, with scars that will take a long time to heal. I can't believe the HOA is just going to bulldoze through people's property like this. It's ridiculous that they let the land sit for 30 years and now decide to make it a public park. This is a total invasion of privacy for the homeowners. The HOA should be held accountable for their negligence. They need to work with the community, not dictate terms. It's time for the residents to band together and fight this. The HOA needs to be reminded that they serve the community, not the other way around. This is exactly why people hate HOAs. They allow issues to linger for years, ignoring them until they become convenient to address, often to the detriment of homeowners. In this case, they let the land sit untouched for decades, and now, out of nowhere, they decide to enforce rules that were never previously an issue. It seems like they're actively seeking ways to complicate life for residents. Transforming a private area into a public space without proper consultation is simply wrong. Such actions disregard the privacy and preferences of those living nearby, leading to frustration and distrust. The HOA needs to rethink its approach and genuinely engage with the community. Instead of making unilateral decisions, they should involve residents in the process, seeking input and feedback. This would not only lead to better outcomes, but also help build trust and cooperation. If they continue to ignore the voices of the people they serve, they'll only foster more resentment and division among residents. A collaborative approach is essential for creating a harmonious and thriving community. HOAs are supposed to protect property values, not destroy them. This situation is a perfect example of how they can get it completely wrong. By ignoring the land for so long, they've created a problem that didn't need to exist. Now they're making rash decisions that affect everyone negatively. It's frustrating to see how little regard they have for the people living there. The HOA needs to be more transparent and work with homeowners to find a solution that benefits everyone. The HOA's actions here are just mind-boggling. For 3 decades, they turned a blind eye to this parcel of land, allowing it to become an integral part of the neighborhood's landscape. Homeowners grew accustomed to the privacy and natural beauty it provided, assuming it would remain untouched. Now, without warning, the HOA decides to raze it, showing a complete disregard for the impact on the community. It's as if they haven't considered the consequences of their decision on the people they are supposed to represent. This lack of foresight and communication is precisely why so many people have a negative view of HOAs. Instead of fostering a sense of community and collaboration, they often act unilaterally, imposing decisions without consulting those affected. It's frustrating to see an organization that should be advocating for residents instead making decisions that seem disconnected from the community's needs and desires. The HOA needs to take a more proactive approach. They should be engaging with residents, seeking input, and working together to find solutions that benefit everyone. This means holding meetings, conducting surveys, and genuinely listening to the concerns of homeowners. By doing so, they can build trust and create a sense of partnership rather than opposition. If the HOA continues down this path of making arbitrary decisions without community involvement, they're bound to repeat the same mistakes. It's time for them to shift their mindset and recognize that their role is to serve the community, not dictate to it. Only by embracing a collaborative approach can they hope to improve their reputation and truly enhance the quality of life for everyone in the neighborhood.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.